I always do from the sports writing. Don't go where the others go. Go to the loser's dressing room at all times.
As columnist, novelist, biographer, and raconteur, Jimmy Breslin witnessed and chronicled the American 20th century with an eye for life lived in the lanes of the overlooked and the unwritten. He also contributed 2 classic titles to the literature of cosmic ineptitude. The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, about a crew of dissolute Brooklyn mafioso, and Can't Anybody Here Play This Game, about the 1962 New York Mets. But ultimately, Breslin's most enduring love was newspapers, and he produced pieces that changed journalism. In 1963, the funeral of President John F. Kennedy drew reporters from around the world.
They're all herded together, and they were talking about how Jacqueline Kennedy walked, what Truman looked like at graveside, or the planes overhead. Well, forget about it. Nothing.
Breslin found Clifton Pollard, the man who had dug the president's grave.
He was getting $3.01 an hour to dig the grave. And then when he was through with it, he tried to get back to watch the funeral, and they wouldn't let him back. You're looking like a bum, you're a laborer.
Jack Kennedy, 35th President of the United.
While they were having the big funeral services, he just went over the other side of the hill and he dug another grave. When it was all over, he looked at the grave, they fixed it up late in the evening, and I'm just saying it's an honor to have done this.
Among journalists, his account of that day became a genre of its own. For years afterwards, editors would send reporters out to stories with instructions to look beyond the obvious, to tell their tale through the gravedigger. Breslin grew up in Queens, New York, with dreams of the sports writer's life.
We used to get the Long Island Press at home on 101st Avenue where I lived, and I'd spread it out on the living room floor and read it. Carl Lundquist, that was my favorite writer. I had a candle in my mind to him. He covered the Major League Baseball roundup. Then he'd start with the game of the day and work his way through the schedule. And all I dreamed of was Lundquist riding in a Pullman car from St. Louis. Then you go up to Chicago. All the Pullman cars were at Sunnyside Yards. We used to go down there and stand on the hill and look at them and dream we were going away on them. I didn't know that Lundquist was on 42nd Street, and he used to put a different city on top of the story every day. Then he took the Long Island Railroad home to Long Island. He never went anyplace.
After getting his start on the obituary desk at the Long Island Press, Breslin became a leading figure in what became known as the New Journalism. He and writers like Joan Didion, Tom Wolfe, and Pete Hamill brought literary techniques and personal voices to their work.
You gotta let the people come in and see something, set a scene. You gotta have people talking. Let them hear the people involved talk.
In 1965, as the civil rights struggle was reaching an epic climax, Breslin was in Alabama covering a march from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights. At the front of the march was Dr. Martin Luther King. The very last man was Albert Turner, a bricklayer who wanted to vote.
What bothered Albert Turner on this night was the figure on his pay stub. It said that $27.52 had been taken out for income taxes. He looked at the stub, and a strange thought ran across his mind. If the government can take $27.52 a week, then it can give back something to Albert Turner, like a vote in an election. He represented to me everything in the South. People taking a chance to force change that had to be.
Breslin traveled widely, always writing to the rhythm of the columnist's deadline. He spent the afternoon of June 4th, 1968 in Los Angeles reporting a column about gun violence. That evening, he went to the Ambassador Hotel, where Robert F. Kennedy was holding a rally to celebrate winning the Democratic presidential primary in California.
And then I walked into the kitchen just as they were breaking from their rally. And I'm in the kitchen, and this guy holds the gun out at Kennedy and shoots.
Senator Kennedy has been shot. Is that possible? Oh, my God. I am right here. Rafer Johnson has a hold of a man who apparently has fired the shot.
It was hysteria. They were screaming and yelling, but they couldn't get the gun out of the fella's hand. I remember that.
They've got the gun. I can't see.
All of a sudden, they threw him onto a steam table, and everybody pushed, and I wound up sitting on his legs, and Roosevelt Greer just put an arm over him, and that ended. He couldn't move.
Take a hold of his thumb and break it if you have to. Get his thumb. They have the gun away from the man.
They stamped feet on his hand to get the gun out, and that was that.
Shaken by the assassination, Breslin took a break from the news. He wrote his first novel, a best-selling mafia satire, based on his reporting about the Gallo crime family of Brooklyn, called The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight.
They had a gang war. There was kidnappings and shootings. They kept hitting telephone poles when they shot. They had a lion in the basement.
The meat. Throw the meat.
He took a lion on a leash around Mulberry Street. I had to be nuts not to hang out with that act.
The movie, which flopped with the critics, featured a very young Robert De Niro.
He got $750 a week for that movie. He must get $750 to brush his teeth now.
Breslin himself became a performer in 1969 when he officially entered the race for New York City Council president on a ticket with fellow writer Norman Mailer, who was running for mayor. Their campaign featured a plan for the city to secede and become the 51st state.
That's a bad idea, isn't it? That we could be all alone here with our money and living a nice life.
Much to the relief of themselves and people who knew them well, neither Mailer nor Breslin were elected. During the summer of 1977, when New York City was hit by a vast power blackout and massive looting, Breslin also was writing about the .44 caliber killer, known as Son of Sam, who shot one of his earliest victims just a few blocks from Breslin's house in Queens.
Some weeks after that, a college student named Virginia Voskerichian is walking from the subway on Queens Boulevard down into the station square, and from the bushes jumped a guy with a gun. She got terrified and held a big textbook up to her face, and he shot through it.
After months of terrorizing the city with a spree of shootings that left 5 people dead, the killer sent Jimmy Breslin a letter.
It was printed in big backslash printing, marvelous cadence. Hello from the sidewalks in New York and the ants that dwell in the sidewalks and the dried blood and the cracks in the sidewalks of the city. Signed Son of Sam.
Breslin used his column to plead with the deranged killer, but on July 31st, he struck again. This time in Brooklyn, murdering 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz and wounding her boyfriend. The news sent the simmering city into complete panic.
Many young brown-haired women in Queens are worried about their safety because of the .44 caliber killer. I interviewed one of them. You don't go out as much as you used to?
No, and I'm always with somebody, It scares you.
Ultimately, it was a parking ticket issued near the scene of the Moskowitz killing that led police to a suspect and finally cracked the case. David Berkowitz was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences for the killings.
I never heard from him again except Christmas card from the devil he sent me once or twice.
He might not have been everyone's idea of a man of letters, but the range of Breslin's writing was matched by few in his era. He wrote biographies of Damon Runyon, the chronicler of Prohibition New York, and of Branch Rickey, the Brooklyn Dodger executive who integrated baseball by signing Jackie Robinson. In columns for the Daily News and New York Newsday, he was one of the earliest voices demanding dignified care for people with AIDS. He won the Pulitzer Prize for commentary in 1986 after exposing the use of torture by rogue police officers in Queens.
It's a great thing, though, a newspaper column. You just put yourself into it and make sure that the people want to read it the next day. That gives them something. It's a great obligation to a reader.
He filed his last regular column on November 2nd, 2004, and kept working on new books, plays, and film projects. When the Times spoke with Breslin in 2007, he was about to release his latest book, The Good Rat, about one of his favorite subjects, mafia families.
How do you want to be remembered?
What does it matter? Please don't talk about me when I'm gone. I mean, I don't care what you say or what you do. If I'm not here, it don't count.